and welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 26, the podcast where we discuss books, genre, industry, and our geeky lives. I am your host, Elle Klaus.
I'm your other host, A.R. DeClerc.
Yep. Okay, Ishabelle's not going to introduce herself.
Oh, Ishabelle Torrey?
Yeah.
Paulina Woods.
And today we have a special guest for you, Christine Ellen Riley, who is an editor. She works on a lot of, well, all of my stuff. And we wanted to get an editor, I talk good. We wanted to get an editor on the podcast since we've spoken with a book blogger and a cover artist to give you an insight into the writing process once the author has managed to spit out a rough draft. So, Chris, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. My name is Chris Allen Riley. I am a freelance editor and 1/3 of Roundtable Author Services. I also write romance under the pen name of Bronwyn Green. I worked for 4 years as an acquiring editor for a small e-press and another 5 years as an executive editor at another e-press, where I also managed the proofreading department and the beta reading departments. And I began freelance editing in 2014, and together with authors Jess Jarman and Chris Norris, we created Roundtable, where we offer editing, cover art, promo design, formatting, coaching, anything you need, but I specialize in content and line edits and author coaching. So that's what I do.
Still muted. I'm still muted. Okay. That's a lot to do, actually. And in that vein, what is the typical editing process from a manuscript? So for a new author who's finished their self-edits, what processes would you walk them through?
Well, now I can't speak for other editors, but this is what I do. I talk to the client. I find out when their deadline is, because getting a book back after your deadline, after your Amazon, after your pre-sale goes live, is probably the worst thing ever. I discuss any areas of concern with the client, any areas of concern that they have for their manuscript. Then I evaluate the manuscript. We decide on a price. I use a by the word metric as opposed to an hourly rate. And once the client and I agree on a price, I either slot the manuscript into my queue, dependent on both my schedule and the client's schedule, or I begin the editing process if I'm open. I know a lot of editors will go through a manuscript and they'll focus on a few layers at a time. So they might do a read through for, say, plot and pacing, and then they might go through again and address grammar and consistency issues. That has never worked well for me, mostly because everything just sort of jumps out at me all at once. So my first pass typically covers continuity and consistency, pacing, plot and character development, natural sounding dialogue, plot contrivances, emotional content, realistic conflict, POV, and obviously grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Once I'm through with that first pass, I send the manuscript back to the author. The author completes the edits, sends them back to me. I do a second read through of the entire story. I make additional changes, and then I return the book to the author. On very, very rare occasions, a manuscript may require a third or even a fourth pass. I think the most I've ever done was 5. As a freelance anyway. I sometimes did way more than that working at small presses. But after the second edit, then the author and I revisit cost, basically. But I try to make sure that they have everything that they need in those first 2 passes. And then the author can complete the author completes their second edit, and then I always suggest that you still have a proofreader.
Okay. And that was kind of similar to my experience when I got picked up by Utopia. It was a one pass of content edits, which addressed everything you mentioned in your first pass. And then the second was more, I want to say line edits. And then it got passed off to a third person for proofreading. So that's typical. Now, you mentioned you managed beta readers.
Beta readers,
like a team of.
That was the plan. We had people volunteering. Basically, I was trying to flesh out our proofreading department, and we had some people that didn't pass the test. They did okay on the proofreading test, but they didn't do well enough that I felt confident hiring them as proofreaders, but they still wanted to be involved in book production. And so what I did is they had specific genre interests, and so when a book in say a male historical would pop up, I would ask the people who had checked that as an interest if they wanted to, I'd asked if they want to beta it. They would be sent a questionnaire to fill out after reading the book to send back to me, and they would basically identify anything that might have been missed in edits or by a proofer. The beta readers came after the editing and proofing.
Okay, so yeah, normally I use my beta readers before.
Most people do.
Mm-hmm.
That was not that arrangement was not my idea.
Okay.
I think it would have been better the other way around, but that wasn't. And most of my authors who utilize beta readers do the same thing. The beta reader gets it first, and then the author edits accordingly, and then it goes off to the editor.
Okay. Okay. So you may not be aware, but there is a large movement in the indie self-publishing space where people are skipping hardcore content edits, going right to line edits and proofreading. So what's your reaction to the latest trend of skipping the content edit?
Yeah, that is not a road I would take. And not because I'm an editor, but because I'm an author. You can put out a story that's free of typos and grammatical errors, and that book can still suck. The thing is our stories make sense in our own heads, and we see them playing out in our minds as we're writing them down. At least I do. I think most writers typically see their stories as kind of a movie playing in their heads. But even though we have all of the motivation and character development and everything in our heads, it doesn't always translate to the page. It's not always apparent to our readers. And since we can't stand over the shoulder of every person who picks up a book to explain things when they're confused or pissed off at us because there's this giant plot hole here, we have to make sure that everything actually gets on the page. And I think the best way to do that is to get feedback from a trusted professional who wants what you want, and that's to put out the best story you can. I just had my 10-year published anniversary last month, and I would never stick a book out without an editor. I just wouldn't. Or my proofer, actually. Without my editor or proofer, a book wouldn't make it out. I mean, I'll put flash fiction out on my blog, and that's always unedited because I'm usually writing it the night before because I'm super on the ball like that. But never would I put a book out without content edits.
Okay.
But I might be a little neurotic. So.
Well, I think that most people want to put out the best quality work that they can, and I know personally I get too close to my stories that I would not be able to see the forest through the trees.
I think that's really common because I'll point stuff out to authors sometimes and they'll be like, oh, I had no idea someone would interpret that way. So you just don't see that stuff.
Okay. Amy, what were your questions?
Okay, so my first question was, what elements in a story that you're reading immediately make you groan or roll your eyes or say, "Oh, not this again"?
How much time? How much time do we have for this?
Let's give us your top 3 like most annoying things that you see over and over again that you wish would burn in hell.
Okay, all right. I will try to limit it to 3. I hate when authors try to shoehorn stuff into plots because it's popular. So, like, okay, so Navy SEALs, billionaires, bodyguards, and motorcycle clubs are all popular. But when you take those 4 occupations and you cram them into one hero, just because those things are popular and you think that's going to make your book better, I kind of want to throat punch that hero until he's dead. I hate that. I just can't stand that. Same thing with BDSM. It is undeniably a super popular subgenre of erotic romance right now. I love it. I write it. But I have a problem when you're reading what seems to be just a regular straight erotic romance, and there's this phenomenon that I refer to as sudden onset BDSM, where they're going along and suddenly with like the couples just like smack in the middle of a BDSM scene with like no prior indication that either of them were ever interested in it. There's nothing to support it in either action or thought, and certainly no conversation. It's just bam, sudden onset BDSM, and you're left wondering if if you've accidentally wandered into another story. I hate that. I don't like insta love. I read and write romance because I want to watch these people fall in love. For me, it's not satisfying if there's suddenly like poof, they're in love. I'm willing to cut paranormal authors, basically like paranormal and fantasy authors, a little more slack because there's often a biological or magical imperative to the love to make them fall in love, and that's a little different. But in a contemporary or a historical where they suddenly meet and they're just super in love, that'll make me tap out immediately. Alpha holes. I really hate alpha holes. Just misogynistic bags of dicks. Can I say that?
You just did.
Sorry. Okay. You can edit it out. Misogynistic jerks. I can't stand them. I'm not saying I want a very passive hero, but don't be a misogynistic bag of dicks. Those are
Gotcha.
my top 3 probably.
Okay, we might be sisters. Okay.
Yes.
I'll just let you know that ahead of time. Sweet. Okay. Yeah. So my next question is sort of along the same lines. Are there any stories, tropes, or types of stories that you put your foot down and say, I will not read or edit story?
I'm not going to edit anything that I would bill a rape mance. I have no interest. The thing that a lot of people are really fond of is the faux incest stepbrother books.
Gross.
And step uncles, stepfathers, mothers, just all of their step cousins. That's a hard nope for me. I can't do it. It squicks me out. I'm from a blended family. I have 2 stepbrothers, one of whom I'm super fond of, and every time I come across one of those books, I think of my one stepbrother, and I'm just like, no, never in a million years. That's my brother. I can't do the faux or other, any kind of incest book. It's not for me.
Yes, I agree. We actually have discussions in our off the air chats where we come across ads for books like that, or she was my little sister's best friend and now I'm in love with her, and it just gets weird.
I'm actually
after a while
okay with like some of the I don't want to call them sibling romances because that sounds so wrong. But some of the sibling friends books,
right. These were some like she was an infant and he like has watched her grow up her whole life. And now all of a sudden he has the hots for her.
No,
that's where
gross.
we started getting squeaked out. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, not for us.
Nope.
So I'm gonna go a little bit away from your reader side to your editor side, but beyond grammar and punctuation, spelling, obvious things, what are the top 3 things that every author needs a handle on to successfully write an engaging story?
Oh, okay. I think probably my number one wish list item that I want to see all authors bring to the table is a solid GMC. I firmly believe that any character in any book, whether it's a romance or not, needs to have a solidly defined goal, motivation, and conflict. What do they want? Why do they want it? Why can't they have it? Without any kind of a GMC, I think a compelling plot is pretty much impossible. And it has to be something, those goals need to be outside the romantic relationship. Otherwise, it's just sort of a puppet character. It doesn't, there's no substance to that character without those things to help drive the plot and their character development forward. Number 2 on my list is probably I would like to see an author have a solid ability to show rather than tell. Don't tell me the heroine had a panic attack. Make me feel it. Make me feel her clammy skin, her pounding heart, her shallow, gasping breaths, her lightheadedness, and the spots that she gets floating in front of her face. I want all those details, and I don't want to be told about it. I want the author to show it to me. And the same thing is true of a love scene. If you're writing a love scene, don't tell the reader that whatever's happening is erotic or sensual or sexy as some kind of shorthand for what's going on. Use specific details that illustrate this to the reader. Even if you're not writing an explicit or an erotic romance, details are still key. Details help the reader feel emotionally connected to your characters, and someone who's emotionally connected to your characters wants to keep reading to find out what happens, and someone who's invested enough to keep reading to find out what happens is more than likely going to buy your next book. It's kind of like the writer version of what's that book? If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. I don't know if you have kids or read that to your kids, but it's that sort. It builds. Those things build, and showing is so important. And I've got one more, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's a tie. Head hopping, don't do it. have if you're doing a romance that has just 2 people, you should have just 2 points of view. I like to see it one per scene or even 1 per chapter rather than bouncing back and forth. That's a good rule of thumb. And I'm going to give this a 2-fer, and the other part is realistic dialogue, because when dialogue sounds super stilted and unrealistic, it pulls most people right out of the narrative flow. And when they're pulled out of the flow, it's harder for them to connect with the characters. And if they don't connect with the characters, they're probably not going to keep reading. So those are my biggies.
Is there any book or podcast or blog that you would suggest a newbie author, or even kind of already been out there authors like the 3 of us, 4 of us, that we should listen to or watch or read about the craft of writing? Because I know I'm always trying to get better at the art of being a writer. All the other stuff, it comes later. But if you have any good suggestions, let us know.
Alex Corvo. Her name is spelled K-O-U. Hang on, Kourvo. And her blog is called Writing Slices. And what she does, she only reviews writing books. She only reviews books on craft. She has been incredibly helpful in terms of helping me direct writers to certain books to help them hone certain aspects of their craft. Now, some of this is stuff that I do in coaching too, but Alex has just a brilliant blog. Let me see if I can find it real quick while we're talking, and I'll give you the address. I can actually spell writing.
The address in the show notes.
Oh, sweet. Okay, that would be awesome. Let's do that.
So just get that to me after the podcast.
Okay, I will do that.
So Ish had a question, and she wanted us to pass it along to you because she's too sunburned to chat. But
it's hard to be sunburned.
Yeah. So her question was, why do you edit? Is it something you fell into, or is it something you actively sought to do?
It is something that I completely fell into. I fell into it shortly after I started publishing. I'd recently sold to the second house that I'd published with, and before going indie, and the owner at the time, and she was also the editorial director, mentioned how clean my manuscripts were when I turned them in. And she asked me if I wanted to proofread, and I said sure. And so I did that for a while, and she promoted me to acquiring editor because I was finding things in the proofreads that had gotten missed, like plot things. And I really enjoyed doing that. I loved diving into the slush pile and looking for new manuscripts. It was so much fun. And I met some amazing people that way. One of my best friends, Jessica Jarman, who she and I run Roundtable together, that's where I met her, was through the slush pile. And prior to publishing, I had the benefit of being in a really amazing critique group that met once a week in person for years, every Friday night. And that's actually where I really learned the art of how to tell a good story, how to help bring out a good story, and how to deliver criticism gently but helpfully, and in the most constructive way possible. I fell into it by accident, but I love it. There's something just really satisfying about helping a good book be a better book.
Okay, I think it's my turn. But before my questions, I'm going to ask the next one for Ishabelle. What do you do when you take on a client and they turn out to be difficult to work with?
Well, it depends on how bad I need the money. No. It also depends on what you mean by difficult. I have been really lucky. The vast majority of the people that I've worked with have been just really lovely. Some people are much tougher edits, as in their books require more work. But for people that are difficult to work with personality-wise, well, when I worked for the two publishing houses, I didn't have a choice. I just had to suck it up, buttercup, and deal. And there was a lot of venting quietly, not to them, but to my coworkers and friends. But now, if someone is just an ass, I have never bailed on a project, and I won't, because I think it's important to meet deadlines. I will finish. I'll finish their book, and then once everything is all said and done, if they bring me another one or mention that they'd like to, I will just say, hey, I don't think our styles really mesh, and if I know someone that I think they would mesh with, I will suggest that person, or I will just wish them luck and send them on their way. It's
Smart.
It's not perfect, but it's better than both of us banging our heads and being miserable, because not everyone is a good fit for someone else. I mean, personality is huge, especially in writing. And even if we're not, even if the people involved aren't particularly egotistical, there's still a lot of ego involved in giving this thing that you created to someone else so they can help you make it better. Tear it apart. Yeah, basically tear it apart. That's hard to do. I know. I've been there. It's not easy.
I actually had an editor drop me, and it wasn't even because I'm a horrible person. And she just decided after the second book this wasn't the genre she wanted to edit, and she forgot to tell me for like 2 months. She's like, I'll get it to you, I'll get it to you, I'll get it to you. Then finally she just sent it back, and she's, I'm not going to charge you for the second round of edits, but I didn't even finish them. And I'm like, okay. So, I mean,
wow.
Yeah. So I'm very leery of editors now, but I mean,
no, I don't blame you. That's really shitty.
Yeah, it was weird. But before I know that we already sent you the questions, but I want to scrap my first one because I don't like it. So,
all right. What you got?
So instead, I'm gonna ask this question because it's something that comes up. It comes up a little bit like we talk about love, sex scenes.
Yeah.
And I remember in my first one, I did have my second book. I have gargoyles, and I forgot that he has nails. And she looks and she writes back to me. She goes, "Well, he just killed his mate." I was like, "Oh crap! I forgot to have him put his nails back in." So, is there any, like, you're reading something and they say like a certain word or they say a certain sound, and you're just like, "Oh God, really?" And like, you don't want to take away their voice, but is there certain things that you read in the love scenes or sex scenes where you're just like, that's just not possible? What are you thinking?
Yep. Like, hey,
a small example because we want to laugh.
Well, I don't want to. I don't. It just, in case any of my authors listen to this, that would be a terrible thing to do. But sometimes body parts don't do what you think that they might be able to do in a love scene, or sometimes word choice is a big one. I don't think I've had any really terrible, like, laughable euphemisms for body parts. Gosh, I'm trying to think because the things that are coming to mind are all just so specific. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Honey pot. Like, I read one where she used a honey pot in his sickle, and I was like, what the fuck? Okay.
Now that has not come across my desk, but I would do. Obviously, I'm a freelance editor, so the author can make his or her own choices about whether or not they would like to keep a word. But if honeypot and sickle came across my desk, I would try to put a stop to that shit right now. I don't, as a reader, I don't want to read it. As an editor, no, thank you. Just a world of no.
I've come across some that I don't even know how they pass through editors, and I'm reading, and it throws me so far out of the sex scene. I'm just like, yeah, okay, I'm done with this. Because
there was a book out. It was, oh God, I wish I could remember what it was called. It was just ridiculous. Harlequin put it out. It was basically, it was the most. It was just. Wow, it was super full of casual racism. It was about a white geisha. Because, of course, if we're writing a book set in Japan, we can't possibly have a Japanese woman.
Wow, that's just bad.
Right? Okay. And the euphemism used for his penis was jade stock. And I was like, okay, you know what? If it's green, probably he should go to a doctor. And Jenny Trout actually was reading this book, and she was in my long ago critique group, and she is one of my very, very dearest friends. And she was reading that, and we just all sat there with our mouths hanging open, because no, if it's green, that's also, you don't want that anywhere near you. What are you even thinking? These are terrible. It also, I want to say that I don't know if that was the book or if it was a different one, but her badge was a moon grotto. So just something like
Wow.
that. I would feel honor bound as an editor to stop that. I I just I would have to throw myself on that sword and just be like, no, please don't do this.
Do you want people to laugh at you, or do you want people to enjoy your work? You got two choices.
Exactly. This isn't a comedy, so it's not supposed to be anyway. But yeah, no, there's some doozies out there, but you know, I'm a little disappointed. I haven't gotten a really good one like that, and I did get a few back when I worked at actually mostly in the slush pile. I would get some lovely ones, but
Nothing nowadays.
it's been a while since nothing that nah. Most people are pretty good. Mostly what I get is a lot of word drop, and I have to say, hey, you've just used that word 5 times in one paragraph. Please stop. Find a
that's
different
my problem.
Find a different word for penis. Okay. Find a different word. But yeah, no, I haven't had any really good ones. I mean, I've read some just hideous ones, but not from any of my clients, thankfully.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ish. I like how now you want to speak. So getting a little away from the topic of writing and editing, if you have downtime, what will we most likely find you doing?
Cleaning up cat puke. I have cats. No, I will. If I'm not editing or writing or reading, I will probably be knitting or sewing. I am a crafty bitch. I will be knitting or sewing or cross stitching or playing with clay if I can get my hands on a kiln for pot. I love doing pottery. I also like to binge watch a little Netflix, and honestly, I'm usually if I'm doing that, I'm knitting or listen to music and I'm sewing. I'm usually multitasking. I'm literally knitting right now while we're doing this podcast. So
Oh, I play games on my phone sometimes while we're podcasting, but you didn't hear that from me.
see, I wouldn't do that because that would be too distracting. But knitting I can do without looking at it or thinking about it. So I can do that. Oh, I'll play Words with Friends. I will do that. But that's usually it. So I was spending time with my family, obviously, and friends, but mostly making stuff.
Well, I think that kind of answered my third question. It goes, everyone is addicted to something: coffee, painting, video games. I got video games, TV. What would you say that is your like addiction? Like you have to do it other than writing and editing and reading?
Well, the crafting stuff, because I can't just sit still. But also if I had like a food addiction, I love regular Coke. I don't drink it anymore, but I really love it. And I would say that if I started drinking it again, I'd be a goner. And washi tape. I have a super unhealthy addiction to washi tape for my bullet journals, which I also spend a lot of time working on those. So that might qualify as an addiction, actually.
If
yeah,
you spend a lot of money on it, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I spend a lot of time working on them. So I have a daily bullet journal, a writing one, and a publishing one. So, gives me something to do, something else crafty to make.
I don't even got one.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
I need it to keep me organized. What was that?
To start one, I just let it go. Ish, sorry, Elle, you want to ask Ish last question?
Yeah. How does being an editor affect your own reading and writing?
Oh, yeah. Editing professionally has really impacted my ability to read for pleasure, because once that part of your brain is turned on, it does not turn off ever. So things tend to jump out at me and pull me out of the flow of a story. And it doesn't even have to be an error. It can just be like, oh, really? That's what she decided to do there? Huh. Well, I wouldn't have done that. But maybe that's true of all writers. though I'm reading a really good book right now and I haven't been pulled out of the flow once, and that's kind of a miracle. On the plus side, editing has made me a much better writer. I learn something from every single manuscript that I edit, and it might be that jade stocks are a terrible idea, but it might. I'm cognizant of the things that I find in other people's manuscript. I'm more likely to catch, if I catch myself doing it, I'm more likely to stop it before it ever even gets to my critique partners. So I feel like it's made me a better writer.
Okay. Well, unless anyone has any emergency follow-up questions, I want to thank you for joining us. I will have links to your author services page and your Bronwyn Green page and Alex Coro's blog in the show notes. Okay. Thank you for joining us. If you liked the podcast, please like, comment, and share. This has been episode number 27. Good night.